We are back on MorningLine. Our guest, Professor Peter Haslag. You see there on the screen, we're kind of talking about migration patterns. Like, Nick, what's that all about? It's about the new movement of people coming and going after the pandemic, the professor telling us. And the idea of here in the city, boy, if you come down to Nashville, I mean, there's cranes and construction and new condos and everything going in. But coming out of the pandemic, people realize that they don't necessarily have to live in the city. A lot of people chose to because they worked there. A lot of us, like me, still work here, but maybe, or their job is here, but they can work from home. Is that changing? Do you think we're going to see a shift where not as many people seeking to live in city centers?
I think that's probably correct.
But nationally, hasn't that been the trend that you go that way? And these city centers have been built up where you're getting grocery stores that you didn't used to have there. You have all these great new condos, more restaurants. I mean, 25 years ago in downtown Nashville, it was a dead zone after things close at 6. Now it's alive 24/7.
Yeah, so I think in general what we've seen is people moving out from urban areas into the suburbs. So kind of we show that on an interstate level. So people even moving from New York City are more likely to move out to a suburb than they were before. The one thing that I would say is that it's going to be interesting to watch with this idea that there's hybrid work and companies need less space. The question is, what do you do with all this commercial real estate downtown? Right. And if you transition into residential and that might reduce the prices a little bit, take off the pressure, then people might actually move back in. And it might become more like of an urban residential area where some people come in 1, 2, 3 days a week.
Oh, but you're saying, though, that these offices be converted then to residential?
Exactly, yeah.
Which makes sense. I wonder if that's going to happen in New York. I mean, you can look at that because that's where all these office spaces are being vacated. Yeah. You got to do something with it.
Yes, and so there they've seen residential prices come back up a little bit. The growth hasn't been as high as, you know, some of these other areas that have had people inflow, like come into the city. But their commercial real estate is still being hurt. And so the other thing with that is when people aren't coming downtown, they're not spending, they're not going out to lunch, and so that hurts everybody else, and so it kind of starts to get this pattern. So you do have to shift in some way to get people there, whether that be residential or get people back in the office, and the question is, which way are you gonna?
I'll tell you, because really a key to a vibrant downtown, and I've seen it personally firsthand here, as I said, when I started here more than 2 decades ago, it was dead. But the key to a downtown or any city to staying vibrant is people living there. If you don't live there, if they just come and work and then leave, then when they leave, it's dead. You know, but now it's right? I mean,
totally.
So it's a good thing, I guess. The question is affordability and what's available right now and all that. Let's take a call from Ann. Ann, good morning. Hi, Ann.
Good morning. I live in East Nashville on a very small, obscure little street that in the matter of 5 years had over 19 homes built on it. Of those 19 homes, only 3 families with children moved on the street. Those 3 families are not using our public schools. Well, they're using charter and private schools. Of those families that moved into those 19 homes, we got many dogs. This is right off of Douglas, and there is not a square inch of undeveloped property, and there are very few homes that have not been torn down. There has been no road widening. There have been no traffic studies. There is no place to increase Gallatin Road, Douglas, Cleveland. There was no forethought in any of this before migration started in East Nashville, and it is bulging, and there is nothing that can be done to improve the traffic. Ambulances cannot get down Douglas 3 times during the day when they need to. The same thing is happening on Gallatin Road, Dickerson Road. We have people being killed on Dickerson Road trying to cross the road at stoplights, using crosswalks. That happens almost every other week. Even if it's not a death, someone is being hit. This is because there was no traffic study done before all this development started occurring. The people that are moving here are not families. They are not supporting our school system. I am 100% invested in the small school that is in our area. I help design, and I know every color and tile, and I have waited for a grandchild to go there. I have kept up with the enrollment. It has not increased. The people that are moving here are using our pre-K, and then they go to charter and private, and that's it. Our city has not planned for what they are allowing to be developed, and that is a problem.
Okay, let's let him comment. You've touched on so many points, but Ann knows her stuff, all right? And it's not just Nashville. It's places like Mount Juliet. I think we're going to see it in Murfreesboro. What do you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in general, the development, this is part of the issue is when you have a lot of people move in, you have to have the right infrastructure to support it. And so there needs to be planning and there needs to be some foresight in how you can address it.
Is part of the issue here, and she's right, they didn't do what they needed to do, but it's part of the issue that maybe, obviously none of us really anticipated this pandemic hitting the way it did. So that made everything worse. Now, the growth was already happening before the pandemic, but it changed a lot, as she just said. So I don't know if not trying to look for an excuse, because by and large, municipalities react. They don't act beforehand.
Yeah, and I mean, because they're not in the business of predicting the future either, you kind of have to see how things are playing out to adjust to them. And so I'm not putting anybody at fault. I don't mean to say that at all, but it is hard to say, like, particularly in the pandemic, I had conversations with assessors, and it's like, can we expect this to move forward? And it's like, I think so, but I don't know. I can't tell. There's a lot of things that could change really quickly, where it just kind of goes back to how it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, but gosh, she said I think 19 houses have been built on her little stretch there. That's also part of it. The way things are being built now and the shortage of land. I mean, you've got folks that have a house and some developer buys it, tears down that one house, then puts up 3 tall skinnies.
Right.
All in a row.
Yeah, I mean, that should help with the housing, right? You're increasing the supply, but they're all being built, or
density.
In my opinion, density and the clientele that it's always at a certain price point. It feels like, at least what I see. So.
And then also others coming in. We know because this market, and I like focusing on this, but you say it's a national trend. These investment bankers that are buying up the properties to end up either renting or, there's a lot of discussion happening now with the state. Phil Williams has done some great stories on what Airbnb can and cannot do and all of this. But I mean, I like the idea of you having the right to do certain things with your home, but I don't want a bunch of Airbnbs around my house.
Yeah, and that's why some of these HOAs are trying to have some influence here.
Shut it down so you can't have that all the time.
Yeah, and perhaps more localized regulation there is important. I don't know. I mean, it's going to...
all that comes down to livability, doesn't it? I mean, that's everything we're talking about here, migration, the moving patterns, housing, traffic, all of that has a direct impact on your quality of life.
Correct, yeah. And I think so long as people have that information going in, because people are transacting and they're looking for certain things that...
So do you have any conclusion on kind of the way it's going? I mean, has it been good? Or has it not been good? You're probably going to say it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, as an economist, I think I have to. So.
Yeah, there's a little bit of both. Well, economically, some. But livability, for me, livability in some of these cities, I'm sorry. And there's certain areas in this city, the livability, you cannot convince me it's been positive. It's bad. I mean, traffic in some of these areas is bad. There's no upside. Zero upside on traffic. Now that doesn't mean there may be other positive things about where you happen to live.
Yeah.
But there are areas where that traffic, you can't say, there's a traffic. No one out there, unless you're a fool, is going to sit there and say this traffic's great.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah, but some people are willing to take a bigger house for a lower cost to have that traffic, right? It's always been the plight of the suburb, I guess, right? Like, move further out, it's a little bit cheaper, you get more land, more space, but it's going to cost you more from the time you go in. And that's why, again, the shift to remote work is so important, because if you have this hybrid work schedule, it should help a little bit with the traffic, but it's also, I don't have to incur that cost every day. I'm incurring that cost twice a week now.
Right.
And so I'm willing to live even further out. So it's pushing people further and further.
You said earlier, as that happens too, as more people do stay at home, it doesn't just affect the office space where your company was renting and maybe they decided to downsize. It affects all the other restaurants and everything.
Yeah.
Businesses downtown. So I just have the image of, you remember back, well, you probably were too young, but back in the 70s, all that's where they went from downtown living, and all of a sudden the hot thing was the mall.
Yeah.
The mall and the stuff out. And then, of course, malls died and it became bad. Do you think we're going to see businesses that aren't making it downtown anymore because they don't have the lunch crowd or whatever, but they're moving out there? Or is that permanently changed because of things like Grubhub, where people are staying at home and they're not even wanting to go out to the restaurants, but going to have the meals delivered to them?
Yeah, so I think on the first point with the downtown issue, I think, Nashville is unique because there's so much tourism in that downtown district.
Right.
So I think Nashville in particular is insulated a little bit from that. I think in general, the economic story, though, is that if you have less people coming into downtown, restaurants are going to have a harder time. And so I think that's probably true outside of our market in particular. But then, and the second question about Grubhub and people not eating out in general, I don't know if I can speak to that directly, but that's probably more of a general trend and not maybe specific to downtown. But it would matter how dense that downtown is, how many people are ordering. So like New York Grubhub might be actually helpful in kind of revitalizing.
Yeah.
But
well, it's interesting too what you say. We've seen so much of the debate over what happens downtown Nashville right now with the big buses, the party buses, and everything else that cruise around, and the fact that there's so many tourists come down. It is the bridesmaid capital of the world and all this, where they come down for their parties. But it just hit me, as people complain about that, people are moving away anyway because of the pandemic. You take those tourists out of the mix to some degree, or you place limits on it more. You may not like where it's going, but if you do that, then Nashville's not insulated the way you said. It's really interesting. We're insulated to a degree more so than a lot of cities our size and bigger that don't quite have that tourist draw. Right?
Yeah, and so we did our first study was really about why people were moving, and then we went to a second study to ask what are the implications. And so there we started looking at municipal debt markets, and that might seem very financy, but it tells a story.
Now, what is a municipal debt market?
So any municipality, so Davidson County issues debt, and so we can go out and observe what people are paying to hold that debt, the prices. So we'll just look at the prices, churches, school districts, all go out and issue debt in the public markets, and so we can observe these prices. And so we're just saying, if we can say something about the prices because they're forward-looking, when people are buying and selling, then they're thinking, what are the tax revenues for these locations? Then we can perhaps understand how permanent it is, what people are thinking about inflows and outflows and how those might be different, like any asymmetries there. And so circling back in terms of Davidson has this inflow. It's seen this growth. We have this tourist income, and so it's able to kind of insulate that, regardless of pandemic or non-pandemic, I guess, to some extent. But some of these other areas that had inflows before and switched to kind of outflows after, which would be New York City and San Francisco, just got hammered.
Which are much larger cities than us, but they get hammered. But we have a certain insulation because we're small enough, and we have such a big tourist block core. All right, we'll take a break on that. When we come back, a few more phone calls, more with our guest, talking about just the growth in the city and what it means for us moving forward, and really how much longer this will last, if these trends will wane or if they're permanent. We can get into all of that right after this. Stay with us.